Jarvis Landry and Odell Beckham. We're going to talk about those two specifically today and what to expect from them in 2020. So, Scott, you mentioned the numbers. Jarvis Landry last year, 138 targets, 83 catches, 1,174 yards, 6 touchdowns. For Odell Beckham, 15 games, 133 targets, 74 catches, 1,035 yards, 4 touchdowns. When we start there, it's sort of an interesting comparison because, like you mentioned, Scott, Jarvis Landry had one of his best seasons, really, from a yardage standpoint, from the whatever you want to call it, distance standpoint, yards per catch, something like that. Odell Beckham actually kind of had to grind to get to that 1,000 yards and had one of his worst seasons statistically. So just looking back at last season, Scott and Mary Cal, both of you. We'll start with you, Scott. What will you kind of remember from those two on Sundays and kind of what you saw from them?
I mean, with Odell, it was just a constant storyline of, are the Browns doing enough to get him the ball? And is he getting the ball enough? Is he getting it enough in places where he can make plays with it? That never seemed to go away, even though he ended up, Jarvis and Odell, both top 10 in targets in the league. So the passes were there. It's just what he was doing with it. And how often they connected. So that was there. With Jarvis, we remember the games where he, at the beginning of the season, I think both Odell and Jarvis mentioned, 1 week, he could have a big game and that's fine. The next week I can have a big game. Well, it was pretty much that week Jarvis had a big game and Odell's big game never really showed up. So I think, like I said, Jarvis pretty much, stayed level with what he did his first year with the Browns, and Odell was a lot like, his season was a lot like his injury season in New York, performance-wise. He had a lot of drops last year. It was the second most. And he struggled to get just over 1,000 yards. And we're saying he struggled to get over 1,000 yards. But, again, it's Odell Beckham Jr., and he kind of sets the bar a little higher, So, I mean, what I remember is just the constant, Odell's not doing good enough, and Jarvis is probably where he's supposed to be.
Mary Kay, same question to you.
You know what? My takeaway from Odell, even though he did get over that 1,000-yard hump, my takeaway was just seeing him open so many times, or seeing him frustrated that he didn't get the ball and just wondering why they weren't making that connection. Seeing Baker and Odell just being so off on some of the throws and not really knowing, whose fault that was. So that's what I hope that they can clear up this year. I hope those two guys can get on the same page. It's not going to be easy because obviously they're not together again. And hopefully they can get what they need to get in the time that they'll have together during training camp. But Odell always says it needs to be in game. We've got to get the in-game chemistry down. So hopefully those guys can get it down. And it's going to be a matter of, once again, this is a very precise rhythm timing offense. So he's going to have to be very, very, very precise in his routes. And Baker is maybe they can each give a little bit. You know what I mean? Maybe Odell can try to be a little bit more precise with the timing and the rhythm, even though, he draws double teams. So he's going to do whatever he can do to get open. And you can't really fault him for that. Baker, on the other hand, likes to have the guy be exactly where he's supposed to be when he needs him to be there. Maybe he can kind of give Odell a little bit of an opportunity to do what he needs to do to get open and still get him the ball, even if it's not exactly perfectly the way that it was drawn up or practiced.
It's something to monitor because we've talked over and over again about this offense and how it is different than what we've seen. This isn't 11 personnel. There's going to be tight ends. You got 2 running backs who are really good. One of the best running back 1-2 punches in the NFL. You just signed a tight end to big money. You've got a fullback on the roster that you traded for. So we know what this offense is going to look like, and maybe it's not super conducive to getting these guys, the most targets in the league. I do think there's a way to keep them happy, though. And with Jarvis, I think if you're winning, I think that helps, especially if he's touching the ball and winning. But I think there's a way that you can do it. But, that's Kevin Stefanski's job and Alex Van Pelt's job is to keep them happy, while they're trying to sort of run this offense they want to run. We're going to play the over-under game here before we go again. For both receivers, combined, I'm going to try and come up with a tougher number. So we got to go above 2,000 yards. Let's say 2,200 combined receiving yards for both of them. So that would be an average of 1,100 each. Over, under.
This is a tough one. I'm going to go over. Even though this is going to be such a run-oriented offense, I'm still going to go over on that.
I'm going to say under because both tight ends are going to get a lot of targets. And also Kareem Hunt, he had 40-some targets through 8 games, which
he was their third leading receiver in yards last year.
I think knowing what we know about Kevin Stefanski's offense and how that ball is going to go to other people as well, I think I'd take the under on that.
Yeah, I think I'm gonna go with Scott on this one. I think I'm gonna take the under just because I could see a year where Jarvis maybe dips back down a little bit. Maybe he catches the ball a bunch still, like he always does. But maybe that yardage total dips down a little bit, even if Odell's yardage total ticks up, just because there are so many. When you sit here and like to list those weapons, all those guys have to eat, and all those guys want to eat, and maybe those huge yardage numbers might not be there for those guys. But I think they're both going to have. I think we're going to come away from this year feeling really good about those two guys.